The Midrash in the very beginning of Eicha tells us that there was a woman who lived in the same neighborhood as Rabbi Gamliel. She had a young child, and suddenly this young child passed away. And every night this woman would come and she would be misabel, she would cry over the loss of this child. And Rabbi Gamliel, the great tzaddik, he would hear her crying. And when he would hear the cries of this woman, so Rabbi Gamliel would begin crying as well. But the Midrash says something that's very, very shocking almost, of how his tears were coming down. And the Midrash tells us that although that he heard the tears of this woman who was crying over her child, Rabbi Gamliel began recalling the Chorban Habayis, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And he would cry along together with this woman, not over necessarily her child, but he would cry over the loss of a Beis Hamikdash that was once standing. And the Midrash and the Gemara also says that Rabbi Gamliel cried so much, so many tears he shed over the Chorban Beis Hamikdash, that his eyelashes actually began to fall out. So the Talmidim of Rabbi Gamliel decided that it was so hard on the Rebbe that this woman should actually go and move to another neighborhood because she was crying so much and it was making the Rebbe cry so much. It was dangerous to him to do such a thing. So the question that the Mefarshim ask over here is the following. Rabbi Gamliel is living after the times of a Beis Hamikdash. The woman herself is crying tears over the loss of a child. Why is Rabbi Gamliel crying over a Beis Hamikdash when he hears the pain of a woman that is crying because she lost a child? So Mordechai Gifter Zatzal says over the following idea, which is the yesod that we have to try to learn out throughout this entire day. And that is that Rabbi Gamliel was able to go back and trace the roots of the suffering of this woman. How is it possible that there could be a woman in Klal Yisrael who loses a child? How is it possible that a woman can wake up every single night of her life and she can mourn over the loss of a child that she lost years and years ago? And Rabbi Gamliel realized that the reason that this woman was suffering in her lifetime was nothing else besides the fact that there's not a Beis Hamikdash here in this world. Because when there was a Beis Hamikdash in the world was a different place. Klal Yisrael was a different nation. The bracha, the hatzlacha, the success, the shleimus, the completion of our nation was different. When there's not a Beis Hamikdash in the world, again, don't sing their zmiras, their songs. And Klal Yisrael has no place to come and assemble 3 times a year. And there's no makom, there's no place that you can walk into and see the hiskadlus hashchina, the revelation of the shchina in your eyes. And Klal Yisrael is out in the gullus, out in the exile in the 4 corners of the world. Said Rabbi Gamliel, then that's the reason that this woman is suffering over here. And for that I cry. And therefore, as we're about to embark upon the Kinnos of Tisha B'Av today, once again, we keep hoping that we're not going to be sitting on this floor. So we tell ourselves, okay, next year we'll be sitting on the floor in the new shul. No, that's not the answer. That's not the answer. The answer is that we don't want to be sitting on this floor anymore in Tisha B'Av. Because if we're here and if we're together and if we're sitting on the floor, that means that the Beis Hamikdash is still lying in ruins. And as we mentioned last night, tears are very difficult to muster up. Feelings of anguish and pain are very difficult. We live in such a superficial world. We're always trying to cover up the pain that is there. We're trying to gloss over the difficulties and the issues that we have in life, whether it's with ourselves, with our spouses, with our friends, with our family. We just try to make, just push on, just go to something else. Some meme come up, they laugh, everything will be fine. This is the day without memes, Rabbi Isai. This is the day without WhatsApp. It's the day without checking the news 5,000 times to see what's going on in the world. It's the day when we have to check ourselves. And the checking of ourselves on Tisha B'Av is recognizing any surah that a person has in their life, any suffering, any difficulty, any tragedy, any sickness, any hardship, any disappointment, any frustration. Whether it's for yourself or whether it's for your family, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your neighbors, whether it's with your friends, whether it's globally in Klal Yisrael, anything that is going on in a person's life that causes them pain, that doesn't go the way that we wish that it would go. It's all a siman, it's a sign, and it is an outgrowth of the fact that there's no longer a Beis HaMikdash in this world. So through the Kinnos, we use the different destructions of Klal Yisrael's history. We use the hardships and the challenges and the tsaros and the pain and the suffering of Klal Yisrael through different generations. We use that as the vehicle, as the conduit to allow us to get into this mode. We'll begin to feel what it means to live in a world out of Beis HaMikdash. In a world where there's no Hisgalus HaShechina, in a world where you can't see the Rebbeinu Shalom, where he's hiding behind the curtain, in a world when we don't see the brachas that we would imagine the Rebbeinu Shalom, the Master of the universe, would want for his children. What parent doesn't only want the best for their child? What parent wants destruction for his kid? Never met a parent who wants destruction for his kid. Never met a parent who wants such a thing. Every parent wants only the biggest bracha. If we still sit on the floor thousands of years later, in Gullis, in Tarzana, California, in Sino, wherever we might be today. So that's just a sad reality, that we're not living in Yerushalayim HaKodesh and we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. Going to start with the Kinnos today. Every year we have a different seder, different order that we do things. Last year was a very, very difficult year. You'll recall we were barely even here inside the shul. Tisha B'Av, we davened in the backyard. Those that were brave enough to come and risk being here inside the room, we came together. We sat here in Mass and we celebrated. We had Tisha B'Av together. So Baruch Hashem, much has changed over the last year. We're not in the backyards. We're not in masks, as far as I know anymore. We are back together, the Achdus as one. We had like a rebirth for ourselves this past. So let's start the Kinnos in the beginning together over here. And we'll start with Kina Vav, which is what we start with during the day. The way that we work it is that we give explanation. And then after the explanation of the Kina, then everybody reads the Kina to themselves and we move on. So something that we've done in past years is that we take the psukim that are in the Kina that are related to the words of Eicha, and we try to expound upon that to give us deeper meaning into what this Kina really is all about. And the Kina begins, Shava Asura Meni Shimuni Oivrai, that everything came to a standstill over here. It's talking about the great destruction that took place in Yerushalayim, how once the bustling city with all of the great Kedusha, all of the great Avodas Hashem, everything that was going, it ended. And towards the end of the Kina, it says, Hashivenu Sisi Shima Lagoit Seoni. It says, bring me back to you, Hashem. And of course, this is the famous pasuk at the very end of Eicha, which we all said together last night. It's not enough just to say it once. By the Chazal says it. Everybody says this pasuk at the very end of Eicha. And that is the pasuk that we read last night that says, Hashivenu Hashem Eilecha v'noshuva. Hashem, return us to you v'noshuva, and then we will return. Chadesh Yameinu Keken, and renew our days as if they are new. So the midrash over here is bothered by Hashivenu Hashem. Hashem, you should return us to you. Then Ashuva, and then we will return to you. So who's doing the returning over here? Is it the Rebbeinu Shalom or is it Klal Yisrael? Who's making the first step in this return to the Rebbeinu Shalom? The midrash says over the following: Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'Nashuva. Klal Yisrael says before the Rebbeinu Shalom, Rebbeinu Shalom Shalchahu, it's your job. Because it says in the Pasuk, Hashivenu, return us. We don't have to do anything. You are in charge. You sent us into the Golas. You put us in this fight over here. You return us. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says back to Klal Yisrael, Shalachemhu, it's up to you. Shenemar, like it says in a pasuk elsewhere, Shuvu elai va'ashuva aleichem num Hashem. You return to me, and then I will return to you. Says the Midrash, Klal Yisrael claims that it belongs up to the Rebbeinu Shalom. It's his job to return us, and Hashem says, not my job to return you. It's your job to return yourself to me. And if you don't make that first step, if you don't move in that direction, if you don't start walking towards me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then I cannot come and return myself to you. The pasuk says in Eicha, the pasuk says that Mipi Elyon leitetzei ra'os v'atoif. From the mouth of the Elyon of the Rebbeinu Shalom, there is no bad and there is no good that comes from Hashem. What does that mean? We look around the world, you see everywhere around you. You either see ra'os, you see bad, or you see good. You see people that are prospering and they're successful and they're happy and things are going well. Or you look around the world and you see people that are suffering, people that are in difficulties, people that are struggling. And yet the pasuk says, Yirmiyahu Navi, as he's watching the Chorban take place, he says, Mipi Elyon leitetzei hara'os v'atoif, from the mouth of the Rebbeinu Shalom, Elyon, the one that sees everything. No bad and no good comes. Says the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva on this pasuk. The Rambam writes from this pasuk, we learn that everything that happens in the world, everything that a person does in their life, every reaction that they have to anything that will take place is not because HaKadosh Baruch Hu decreed that it's going to take place, rather because, as the Rambam explains, that nobody is being forced into any action that they do in their life, but rather HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us Bechira, has given us free will, and the decisions that we make in our life is up to us. And if we are going to be a nation that is going to make decisions, so then the toiv and the good that in this world is because we decided to do good. And if Chalila, a person does raw, they do something that is bad, that is wrong in the eyes of Hashem, it's not Mipi Elyon, it's not coming from the Rebbeinu Shalom, such a thing, but rather it's coming from our actions and our decisions and our choices that are here in this world. Like the Rambam writes, you'll never be able to get yourself out of this situation and say, Hashem, you made me do it. I had no choice. You put me into a situation, I was stuck. What did you expect from me? I'm just a human being. Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're a human being. I put you in this situation in order to test your bechira, your free will, to see what are you going to do? How are you going to respond to the circumstance and the situation that is there? And as a result of that, says Yirmiyahu Navi, if you see bad in this world, you should know it's because of you. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is reactive to the actions of Klal Yisrael. When a person does the wrong thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reacts, midah keneged midah. When a person does the right thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reacts also, midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Whatever sorrows that we have in our life, whatever challenges Klal Yisrael is going through, whatever difficulties Chalila are on the horizon for the Jewish people, you watch the news, you'll think that there's no way we're going to even make it out of this room today. That's how foreboding the future of Klal Yisrael and the world is at large. But whatever issues and difficulties there are in Klal Yisrael and our lives and our nation is only because either chosen the ra'is, the bad, or we chose the tov, we chose to do the good. And on Tisha B'Av is a time for a person to hear those words reverberating in our ears of Hashiveinu Hashem Eilecha v'Neshuva. Yes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the end of the day, I can't do it by myself. I can't return to you on my own. There's so many mechitzas, habarza, there's so many barriers that are in my way, there's so many things that are holding me back, there's so many things I've been involved in the last year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. How am I supposed to return to Hashem? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you leave that up to me. But I need to see you, Shuva Eli, I need to see you make the first step, says Hashem. And if you begin to make the first step and you return yourself towards me, so then I'm right here, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm bringing you very close. I mentioned already several times in some of the drashas, this amazing book, which everybody should probably get a copy of and read, The Living Legend of Rabbi Grossman. Fascinating, fascinating man with an Ahavas Yisrael, a love of Klal Yisrael that supersedes and goes above and beyond what we could imagine. And one of his highlights, what he calls of his success in life, is because he's not for himself. He doesn't do things because he wants the glory. He wasn't expecting they're going to write a biography about him while he's still alive in this world. Our school usually writes books about people after they leave the world. He's perhaps maybe the first person in our school to biography about him before, while he's still in the world, and he should live out Me'evesim Shana. He wasn't doing things for this, that he should get a book and that should sell 25,000 copies in a couple of months, and everyone's talking about it. He does everything for Hashem. He does mi pi el yoy lo teitze arois. He doesn't look for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to do. He looks to do himself, and he tries to do good. So he tells over an amazing story over here. He was once in Migdal Emek, which is his city, it's his empire that he built of Torah and of Kiruv and Chizuk that he gives to Klal Yisrael. It was a Shabbos, and the Rosh Koilel of the Koilel there in Migdal Emek was making a bar mitzvah of one of his grandchildren. And the Rosh Koilel is a fantastic Talmud Chacham. He also is one of the heads of the Bezdin over there, and his name is Rav Yosef Gigi. And Rav Grossman walked into the dining room, and he sees Rav Yosef, the Rosh Koilel, surrounded by his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The room is filled with like 150 people that are all, and he takes the whole picture in. And he walks over to Rav Yosef Gigi and he says, do you mind if I speak? And I tell them the story that made all of this possible. And Rav Yosef said to Rabbi Grossman, of course, Rabbi, you can say whatever you like. And Rabbi Grossman gets up and he wishes a mazel tov and he praises the chosen bar mitzvah, and he praises the mishpacha, and he praises the grandfather. And he says, I want to tell you a story. And he says, this story goes back to the original year that Migdal Emek was opened. We had 18 students at the time. Today they have thousands. One of those young men was a boy by the name of Yossi Gigi. He was a boy from a family in Sfas that was somewhat of a brokenish home. There wasn't much money, there wasn't much ruchnius, there wasn't much anything in that house. And somehow he ended up at our doorstep in Migdal Emek. And he came into the classes, he came into the yeshiva program that we were trying to do. And we tried to teach him, we tried to show him the ways. But after a certain amount of time, it was very clear to everybody that it just wasn't going. It's a lo alech, as they say. It just wasn't going. And so one day, this boy comes over to me and he says, Rebbe, can I speak to you? I said, sure. What is it, Yossi? He said, I can't stay here anymore. And he says, what's the problem? I Such a wonderful place. He says, you have too many rules, and there's too much learning, I can't handle this. He says, but you're doing so well over here, Yossi. Why would you want to leave? He says, no, it's not for me. I'm sorry, it was from Tiberia. I'm going back to Tiberia to my family. I don't want to be here anymore. I have to get out of here. So Rabbi Grossman looks at this young man, and he had the following many people should learn. You don't force anyone to do anything they don't want to do. And so he looked at us, and he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a wad of cash. And he says, okay, you don't want to be here. It's not for you. It's too much learning, too many rules. You'd rather go back to your life in Tiberia? Fine. This is what you need to be able to travel home. And I know you have no money. He pulls out a wad of money and says, here, this is enough money to go to the Makola, to go to the store to buy yourself some lunch, and to go onto the bus, and to take a bus and go back to Tiberia and make it to your house. And he puts the money into his hand. And he says, but Yossi, I want to tell you one thing. It's about a 20-minute walk to the bus station right now. You have 20 minutes to think about the rest of your life. If you get back on the bus and you go to Tiberia and you go back to your family and your old life, your life is going to go in a certain direction. We don't know how it's going to end up. We don't know. We have get married. We have children. We have survived the life of crime. We have bracha. We have goodness. You don't know. You have another choice. You can decide to stay here with us. You can decide to stay here in Migdal Emek in the yeshiva. We'll teach you Torah. We'll give you Kedusha. We'll give you a life of bracha. One day you'll be married. You'll have children. You'll stand under the chuppah. One day you'll have grandchildren that you'll stand under their chuppah. One day you'll see the decision that you made, as difficult as it might have been. It was worth it all. So here's the money. As you walk to the bus stop, you think to yourself, what kind of a life would that be? So Yossi took that money and he put it in his pocket, and he walked to the bus stop with the vision of Rabbi Grossman in his mind. And he thought back and forth, what kind of life am I going to be? Which direction am I going? Where am I going to be? And by the time he got to the bus, he decided he's not getting on the bus. And he turned around and he came back to Rabbi Grossman and said, "You knew me, here I am." At that moment, flash forward, how many decades later, Rabbi Grossman says, Harav Yosef, the 20 minutes that you spent on the way to the bus stop, of making the decision of what you wanted to do with your life, look what you were zeichet to, look what you merited. As you sit here today, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, celebrating the bar mitzvah of your grandson. You're a Talmid Chacham, you're a Rosh Koilo, you're a Tzaddik, you're unbelievable. In 20 minutes, look what a person will be zeicha to have, not just for now, but for generations and generations and generations to come. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm here. I'm waiting for you to return to me. I can't just reach in to the mud. I can't reach into the shmutz and just pull you out just like that. I'm not a magician, says the Rebbeinu Shalom. But if I see Shuva Elai, that you begin to return to me and you make that first step, then Hashiveinu Hashem Yirecha. Then says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'll return you. And I'll bring you so close Upbringing is so dear that I'll never let go of it. Tisha B'Av is this time. We have 20 minutes and another 20 minutes and an hour and 2 hours. Which path are we taking? Which direction are we going in life? So we see what we look like today, what we're going to look like in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. What vision do we have of mishpachas that we want to raise, of things that we want to accomplish? How we'd like to look at the end of 120 years when our picture goes up into the heavens. What are we going to look like? Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you make that step in the right direction, Hashivinu, I'm the one that is going to bring you close to me. May we be zeicher Yitzhak Hashem that as we go through these Kinnos together and we begin to introspect the essence and the meaning of our life. And as Hashem, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Hashivinu Hashem Elecha, He will return us to Him, then Hashuva, and then we will return to Hashem. We start with Kinnos. What's am I saying? Holding over here in Kinnos Zion, number 7. And the pasuk, it says over here in the very beginning, again, we're speaking about the korban, the destruction, and all the terrible things that befell Klal Yisrael. And you saw him when they're suffering, of course, it looks very, very bad. It looks horrible for a person, it looks terrible for our nation. But he quotes over here in the first stanza, Zecha Hashem Meha Yolanu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please remember that which has befallen us. So this is a pasuk in Eicha. And the pasuk, the pasuk over here says, Zecha Hashem Meha Yolanu, Hagita Reis Chet Paseinu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should remember us. You should remember what has happened to us, and you should look down and you should see our shame and our embarrassment amongst the nations. So Rabbi Gamliel Rabinovich writes over here the following idea. He says, we're talking about destruction, we're talking about suffering, we're talking about all of the pain that HaKadosh Baruch Hu inflicts on Klal Yisrael. However, the shame, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is used over here is the Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yud Kei Vav Kei is always indicative of the Rachmanis, the mercy that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in Klal Yisrael. So how is it possible that while HaKadosh Baruch Hu is destroying the Beis HaMikdash, and there's death all around, and there's Klal Yisrael going into Golus, into the exile, how is it possible that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses the name of Rachamim, of mercy over it? Should be the Midas Hadin Elokim. And he writes over here the following idea. And he says, Kidei Lo Yidianu is coming to teach us, Shigam Atzoros and Bo Mitzad Midas HaRachamim HaChasodim. Even when we are suffering, even when we're going through difficulties, even when we are challenged, we should know that it's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's trait of Rachamim, of mercy, and Chasodim, it is an act of kindness from Hashem. Because through the Yisurim that a person goes through, we are humbled. Then we're able to do tshuva, and then we can return to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Says Rav Gamliel Rabinovich over here that don't think that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu afflicts the people, that it's coming and it's out of anger and it's out of frustration and he wants to destroy us. On the other hand, HaKadosh Baruch Hu cares about us, so he wakes us up. He wakes us up with Rahmanis, with mercy, because he wants us to return and to get closer to him. And when you're asleep, you can't do tshuva. When you're in one certain way of your life and you don't see that there's other options, you can't do tshuva. When a person is too high on themselves and the arrogance is running high, you can't do tshuva. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll be machmir. I'll humble you. I'll make you low. I'll shame you a little bit. I'll embarrass you. I'll take away your stolz just a little bit. And then in that humility that you have, you'll be able to recognize the error of your ways and you'll begin to return to Hashem. So he writes over here that the language of mem, hey, Mara Midas Hashifus Anova. It's like it says in the pasuk, what are we? What is our life? It's what is it? It's worth what? What's it worth in the scheme of things? A person who lives a life of Mo asks what? What is it all worth? What am I all worth? They're able to remain in the stage or in the position of a person of humility. In order to humble our hearts. When a person will utilize the sorrows that they have in life to humble themselves, then that every sorrow that they go through has reached its point. And therefore we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look at us, Ribono Shel Olam. Look at what we're accomplishing. Look at what we're doing over here. We are certainly trying our best to stand in front of you, humble and in awe with understanding that everything that you do to us is only because you want to bring us closer to you. And that's the nature of tshuva. The nature of tshuva is that if a person doesn't recognize where they're coming from, and a person doesn't understand where they are going, and a person doesn't see what they could accomplish and how much better they could become, so then the person is never going to be able to return to Hashem. So in all of the suffering that HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings to Klal Yisrael, it has one intention. And that intention is not to hurt us, not to pain us, not to make our lives miserable, but rather the intention is to bring us back to the Ribono Shel Olam. And the only way that's going to happen is if there is a hachna, is if there is a humility. There's an amazing story that Rabbi Gladstein brings down in his book about Yisrael Lau. Yisrael Meir Lau ended up becoming the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael for many, many, many years. His beginnings were very humble beginnings. He was a young boy when the Holocaust broke out, and he survived through miracle after miracle. That's the only way that he survived. And he brings down the following story. He says that they were taken into all the men, the women and the children were separated from the men, and they were taken into the great synagogue in Petrokov, where they lived. And what took place over there, he writes, was inhuman. I can't even describe into words what you would see taking place inside of that synagogue. He said there were guards that were there, and they were screaming for all of the women and the children to line up. And they made a small doorway that everybody's going to have to go out of. And it's going to be one at a time. And whoever is told to go through that doorway, they're going to be able to live. They'll end up going on to the next stage of life. But whoever was not called their name and they were told to remain inside that room, they would end up dying in the end. That whole place was fire. And she understood what was going on over here, and she realized that she and her children are in very great danger. Hope on the other side, and that's the end of his life. Yisrael Meir Lau and his mother survived, and his brother died at that moment. From there, he went on to Auschwitz, I believe. It was the Buchenwald concentration camp. He survived horror after horror, miracle after miracle he was. And he survived and he became the chief rabbi of Eretz Yisrael for many years. And he said there's always one question. Of all the things that he saw, everything that transpired throughout all the years that he was there in the war, there's one thing that bothered him, that he had no teretz, he had no answer for. He wanted to know, why was it that when they were running out the door, that he and his mother were zeicher to freedom, but his brother Shmulik was the one that got caught and he died on the spot? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu decide to save the two of them and their brother, the son of his mother? Why was he left? So he said the following. He said, the question is not why did it happen that way? He said, but rather the question is, what does the Ribono Shel Olam want from me? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me life, he allowed me to survive, even though my brother and his father was perished right before that as well, then I must ask myself, what am I still doing here in this world? And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu left me here in this world, it must be because he wants something for me to accomplish and to do. And Rabbi Glasstein goes on to write, if every single Yid would think about it, our entire existence is nothing less than miraculous. If you go back to the times of the Churban Abayis, there were millions of people that died. That means that you are an offspring of one of the people who did not die in the Churban Abayis. And if you then follow Klal Yisrael through the Gullus, all the places that we went, crusades and pogroms and inquisitions, and there were millions upon millions, and Rabbi Bleiweiss the other night in his shir explained how by the Black Plague, how many hundreds of thousands of millions of Yidden died in Europe. Most of us are European. That means that you are the offspring of one of the fortunate souls who did not die anywhere in history from the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash until this very day. If a person would make the astronomical calculations of what it means that you are sitting here today, and that you have parents and you have children and you have aunts and you have uncles and you have Jewish family that is around you, if you would make the calculations, it defies all logic that a Yid, and therefore everybody's mechuyev has to ask themselves, why am I alive? There are millions of Jews that died, and their whole train of lineage is gone. There's 6 million Jews who perished in the Holocaust not long ago. Their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren cut off from this world. There were hundreds of thousands of Yidden throughout the Crusades and the pogroms and the Inquisition that were told either you convert to Christianity or we're going to kill you. They were burned at stakes. They were maimed. Their families were dug their own pits and they were thrown in there dead. They were burnt alive in shuls. If a person is alive today, that's perhaps, as Yaakov Emden writes in his commentary to the Nitzchias of Klal Yisrael, he writes, Chai Nafshi, I swear to you, the biggest nace of all in the entire universe, greater than the creation of the world, greater than the Kriyas Yamsuf, greater than all of the miracles that Hashem has wrought for us, the greatest nace, Chai Nafshi, I swear, he says, is that Klal Yisrael Chai V'Kayim, that we're still alive today. And within that nace, within that miracle, there's miracles within miracles, we're here. So we're not obligated to ask, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu leave me alive and he took somebody else? Why is my mishpacha's name still in the world? And those mishpachas, those children, who go to these Holocaust memorials and receive the children's memorial. All of those children, they never got married. They never had children. They never had grandchildren. They never lived. They were taken at 6 months old, or 6 years old, or 16 years old, gone, cut off. Somewhere in the miraculous way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, he made it that your zera, that your seed that you came from was going to survive the millennia of all of our struggles. And for that, we're obligated to ask ourselves, why am I here? Says the king, you know why you're here? You're here to humble yourself, to recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and to do everything that is within our power to bring ourselves closer to Hashem. And when we utilize the long gullus that we've been in for thousands of years, and we see the difficulties in our lives personally, as a community, as a clown, and we become humbled by those moments in our life, and we ask the question, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what do you want from me? And then we make a difference for ourselves and the Father's. So that it was worthwhile that that one person who was on the way to selection, and in the last minute, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought Eliyahu Navi and pushed away the crowd, and the Nazi guy didn't see this person, and he went off into the right side and not the wrong side. And from thence you come. So then says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you understand my message and you understand why it is that you're here and why we are keep going further and keep going on, how Klal Yisrael reinvents the wheel again and again and again. It keeps building, it keeps growing, it keeps thriving in our ruchnius, no matter what generation we are in. Then he says that's the purpose of our existence. And people like that could be the nation that will be Zeicha to Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Yira B'Yaminu. Mishnah Kinnos. We're going to turn to Kina Yud, skip. Kina here speaks about the loss of all of the avodah, all of the work of the Kahanim that took place in the Beis HaMikdash. And once upon a time, it was a different world where you could go and you could bring your korban. You could go and you could see the Kedusha. You could go and you could hear the Zmiras of the Levim. And although we ourselves, we don't have no connection to it, we don't really understand what it means. We try to do that, we have a little bit of a connection of what took place. The Kinnos says towards the end of this, over here, it says in the letter